I am Lorraine Reed, 30 years old, an elementary school teacher. That Christmas Eve, I landed in Rochester, New York, my heart brimming with excitement to surprise my family at their annual holiday party. Snow blanketed the streets, lights twinkled, and the city looked like a festive painting. But the moment I stopped in front of my parents' house, a strange feeling made me hesitate. Quietly, I slipped around to the back, hoping to sneak in. And that's when I saw him. My grandfather, his frail body shivering in the darkness, his eyes wide with fear. No coat, no blanket, just him alone in the biting Rochester cold. Inside, laughter echoed. My parents and sister clinked champagne glasses, their faces glowing by the fireplace. They looked cheerful and warm while my grandfather was left outside just a few steps away. My stomach twisted, anger rising in me. I rushed to him, his trembling hands clutching mine, and carried him inside. The room fell silent instantly. Every gaze turned toward me, some filled with shock, some with guilt, and others with defiance. I held my grandfather tighter, each shallow breath he took strengthening my resolve. I realized this wasn't just a fleeting moment, this was the beginning of a confrontation I had never imagined. What kind of family abandons their own? And was there anything that could possibly make this right? If you've ever experienced a moment that made you see your family in a completely different light, share it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to join me in uncovering more stories that touch the deepest corners of the heart. The Rochester snow stung my face as I approached the backyard. My grandfather stood there, his thin frame trembling in the dark, no coat to shield him from the biting cold. His eyes, usually warm with stories of old wars, were wide with fear, darting like he didn't know where he was. My heart sank. This wasn't just neglect. It was something crueler. I rushed to his side, wrapping my scarf around his shoulders. "Grandpa, it's me, Lorraine," I whispered, my voice cracking. He gripped my hand, his fingers ice cold, and mumbled something I couldn't catch. Inside, the clink of glasses and laughter from the living room mocked the scene outside. I guided Grandpa toward the back door, my boots crunching on the snow, and peeked through the window. My parents and sister stood by the fireplace, their faces lit with smug satisfaction, champagne flutes in hand. "He's just a burden now," my dad said, his voice sharp. "Can't even hold a spoon without shaking." My mom added, her tone dripping with disdain. My sister chimed in, laughing. "Why keep the old man around? He's useless." My blood boiled. They were talking about Grandpa, the man who'd raised me with fishing trips and bedtime stories, like he was nothing. I pushed open the door, helping Grandpa inside. The warmth of the house hit us, but their stares were colder than the snow outside. "What's he doing in here?" my sister snapped, setting her glass down. I ignored her, settling Grandpa on the couch, his hands still trembling. "You left him out there?" I said, my voice low but shaking with rage. "In the cold, alone, like he doesn't matter." My dad shrugged. "He's fine. Parkinson's makes him dramatic." My mom nodded, sipping her drink. "We're not his nurses, Lorraine." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. They didn't see Grandpa's fear, his humiliation. I leaned closer to him, checking his pulse. It was weak, unsteady. "We're leaving," I said firmly, helping him stand. My dad raised an eyebrow. "You're overreacting. He's not your responsibility." But I was done listening. I grabbed my coat, draped it over Grandpa's shoulders, and led him out the front door. The snow kept falling, but I felt a fire inside me. They'd crossed a line, and I wouldn't let it slide. I drove us to a small hotel a few miles away, the only place open on Christmas Eve. The clerk gave us a quiet room, and I helped Grandpa settle into a chair, his breathing still uneven. "You're safe now," I told him, tucking a blanket around him. He looked at me, his eyes softer but still haunted. "Thank you, Lorraine," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I pulled out my phone and dialed Stephen Brooks, my friend and a nurse who'd always been there for me. "Stephen, it's urgent," I said when he picked up. "Grandpa's in bad shape." "Can you come to the hotel?" He didn't hesitate. I'm on my way. While we waited, I sat by Grandpa watching him sip water, his hands shaking less now. I thought about the years he'd spent with my family, how his condition had worsened, and how they'd turned on him. Parkinson's wasn't his fault, but they treated it like a crime. Stephen arrived within the hour, his medical bag in hand. He checked Grandpa's vitals, his face grim. He's dehydrated, Lorraine, and his stress levels are through the roof, he said quietly. What happened out there? I recounted what I'd seen: the backyard, the cold, the cruel words. Stephen's jaw tightened. That's not just neglect. It's abuse. I nodded, my resolve hardening. They're going to answer for this, I said, my voice steady now. Stephen agreed to document Grandpa's condition, his notes a first step toward justice. As he worked, I looked at Grandpa sleeping now and knew I'd do whatever it took to protect him. The next morning, I brought Grandpa to my apartment. The small space, cluttered with books and lesson plans, felt like a sanctuary after last night's chaos. Grandpa sat on my worn couch, his hands still trembling slightly, but his eyes were calmer now, taking in the familiar photos on my wall. I handed him a mug of tea, watching him struggle to hold it steady. His Parkinson's had worsened over the years, but seeing him so vulnerable hit me differently now. I couldn't shake the image of his fear in the backyard, and it stirred something deep, a mix of guilt and anger I hadn't faced before. As I sat beside him, my mind drifted back to childhood summers at Lake Ontario. Grandpa would take me fishing, his strong hands guiding mine to cast the line. "Patience, Lorraine," he'd say, his voice steady as we waited for a bite. He'd tell stories of his Navy days, of storms and comrades, his eyes sparkling with pride. Those moments shaped me, gave me strength. But now, watching him sip tea, I realized how much he'd faded. His shoulders, once broad, were hunched. His stories, once endless, had grown quiet. When had it started? When had my family turned on him? I thought back to 2 years ago when Grandpa's tremors got worse. He'd dropped a glass at a family dinner, and my dad rolled his eyes, muttering about the mess. My mom started avoiding him, saying his shaking made her nervous. My sister, always chasing social status, stopped inviting him to her events, calling him an embarrassment. I'd noticed it then, but I'd been too busy with teaching, too caught up in my own life to act. Guilt gnawed at me. I should have stepped in sooner, should have seen the pattern, how they'd isolated him, dismissed his needs, left him to fend for himself. Grandpa stirred, setting the mug down with effort. "I didn't want to be a burden," he said softly, his voice breaking. I knelt beside him, taking his hands. "You're not a burden, Grandpa. You never were." His eyes welled up, and I felt a knot in my chest. This wasn't just about last night, it was years of neglect of my family, treating him like he didn't matter. I remembered how they'd stopped taking him to doctor's appointments, how his medication ran low because it was too expensive. $5,000 a year, my dad had complained, as if Grandpa's health wasn't worth it. I stood pacing the room, my anger flaring. They'd let him deteriorate, blaming his Parkinson's for their cruelty. I couldn't let it go on. I grabbed my phone and called Stephen Brooks, my friend from college who'd checked on Grandpa at the hotel last night. "Stephen, I need your help again," I said when he answered. "I'm going to fight for Grandpa, but I need proof they've been neglecting him." Stephen's voice was calm but firm. "I saw enough last night to know this is serious. I'll help you document everything." He came over that afternoon, bringing his medical bag. As he checked Grandpa's vitals again, he noted the signs of chronic stress: high blood pressure, irregular heartbeat. "This isn't just Parkinson's," he said, his brow furrowed. "Neglect has taken a toll." I nodded, my resolve hardening. Stephen suggested checking Grandpa's medical records for missed appointments or unpaid bills, anything to show my family's negligence. I thought about the times I'd visited and seen Grandpa in threadbare clothes, his prescriptions half filled. Those weren't accidents. They were choices my family made. I sat down with Grandpa, asking gentle questions about the past year. He hesitated, then admitted how my dad had stopped driving him to therapy, how my mom would lock him out of the living room during family time. My sister, he said, had once told him to stop shaking or stay out of sight. Each word felt like a punch. I wrote it all down, my hands shaking with fury. This wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate, cruel. I looked at Grandpa, his face lined with exhaustion, and made a silent vow I'd protect him no matter what it took. Stephen and I spent the evening brainstorming. He knew a social worker who could connect us to elder care advocates. We need solid evidence, he said, jotting down names of clinics Grandpa had visited. I agreed, feeling a spark of hope. This was the start, gathering proof, building a case. My family thought they could brush this off, but they were wrong. I'd make them face what they'd done, not just for Grandpa, but for everyone they'd hurt with their callousness. A few days later, I returned to my parents' house. The Rochester streets were quiet, the post-Christmas calm settling over the neighborhood, but my heart pounded as I pulled into their driveway. I needed to get Grandpa's belongings, his clothes, his old Navy medals, anything to make my apartment feel like home for him. I'd left him with Stephen safe and resting, but the thought of facing my family again made my stomach twist. I took a deep breath, grabbed an empty duffel bag, and stepped out of the car, determined to keep this quick. The front door was unlocked, and I walked in without knocking. The living room smelled of pine from the Christmas tree still standing in the corner, but the warmth of the holiday was gone. My dad stood by the coffee table sorting papers while my mom lounged on the couch scrolling through her phone. My sister was there too, flipping through a magazine, her designer boots propped on an ottoman. They looked up startled as I crossed the room. "I'm here for Grandpa's things," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering inside me. My dad set his papers down, his jaw tight. "You're making a fool of yourself, Lorraine," he said, his tone sharp. "Taking him away like that. You're tearing this family apart." I clenched the duffel bag's strap. "You left him in the cold, Dad. You call that family?" My mom laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "He's dragging us down, Lorraine. He's shaking his complaints. It's embarrassing. We have a reputation to uphold." My sister nodded, tossing her magazine aside. "He's useless now. Why are you so obsessed with him?" I froze, their words slicing through me. Useless? Grandpa, who'd served his country, who'd taught me to stand up for myself, was useless to them. My fury surged, but I kept my voice low. "You're ashamed of his Parkinson's," I said, stepping closer. "You think he's a burden because he can't keep up with your perfect image." My dad's face reddened. "We've done enough for him. $3,000 on his meds last year and he still can't function." My mom chimed in. "We're not running a nursing home. He's your problem now." I turned toward the hallway, heading for Grandpa's room, but my sister blocked my path. "You're not taking anything," she said, crossing her arms. "You don't get to play hero and make us look bad." I stared her down, my pulse racing. "Move," I said, my voice like steel. She hesitated, then stepped aside, muttering under her breath. I pushed open Grandpa's door, my heart sinking at the sight. His bed, unmade clothes stuffed in a corner, his Navy medals tossed in a drawer like junk. I started packing, shoving sweaters and photos into the bag, each item fueling my resolve. As I worked, I heard a knock at the front door. My mom answered, and I caught a familiar voice. "Helen Walsh, our neighbor." I stepped into the hallway, bag in hand, and saw Helen standing there, her coat dusted with snow. "I saw Lorraine come in," she said, her eyes narrowing at my family. "I know what you've done to Vernon." My dad scoffed. "This is private, Helen. Stay out of it." But Helen didn't back down. I saw him that night, shaking in the backyard. "You should be ashamed." My mom rolled her eyes. "You're exaggerating, just like Lorraine." I stepped forward, my voice rising. "No, she's not. I saw it too, and I won't let you get away with this." Helen's gaze met mine, steady and supportive. "I'll back you up, Lorraine," she said quietly. "I'll tell anyone who asks what I saw." My family froze, their smugness faltering. I seized the moment, my words sharp. "I'm taking this to court. You'll answer for how you've treated Grandpa." My dad laughed, but it was hollow. "You think you can win against us? Good luck." My sister smirked, but my mom looked uneasy, her phone slipping from her hand. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder, Helen at my side as we walked out. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered, her voice firm. I nodded, my chest tight with a mix of fear and determination. My family thought they could bully me into silence, but they were wrong. I'd fight for Grandpa, and with Helen's support, I had a chance to make them pay. In early January, Grandpa settled into my apartment. The Rochester winter was harsh, but my small living room, now lined with his Navy medals and old photos, felt warmer with him there. Grandpa sat quietly at my kitchen table, his hands steadier as he flipped through a book I'd given him. His Parkinson's still made small tasks hard, but he seemed calmer, safer. I'd arranged for Dr. Carol Morgan, a family counselor recommended by Stephen, to visit that week. I needed her to assess Grandpa's mental state to confirm what I'd seen wasn't just a one-night horror, but a pattern of harm. Dr. Morgan arrived on a snowy Tuesday, her clipboard in hand and her demeanor gentle but sharp. She spent an hour with Grandpa, asking about his days at my parents' house. He spoke haltingly, describing how he'd been left alone for hours, how his requests for help were ignored. They said I was slowing them down. He admitted, his voice low. Dr. Morgan's pen moved quickly, noting his anxiety and signs of emotional neglect. "This is serious, Lorraine," she said after. "His mental health has suffered significantly." I nodded, my chest tight. Her report would be key to proving my family's mistreatment. Stephen stopped by that evening, bringing a folder of documents he'd gathered. He'd contacted Grandpa's old clinic and found records of missed appointments, 6 in the past year, all canceled by my dad. They didn't even refill his prescriptions properly, Stephen said, showing me receipts for only 2 months of medication when Grandpa needed 12. I flipped through the papers, my anger flaring. $2,000 in unpaid medical bills ignored by my family. Then Stephen handed me a USB drive. "Helen got these," he said. "Text messages from your sister's phone." Helen, our neighbor, had stepped up in ways I hadn't expected. She'd overheard my sister bragging to a friend about keeping Grandpa in line and managed to screenshot a group chat where my mom and sister mocked his tremors, calling him a shaky liability. The messages were cruel, undeniable proof of their disdain. These could change everything, I told Stephen, my hands trembling as I saved the files. Helen arrived later, her face grim but resolute. "I've seen enough to know they're wrong," she said. "I'll testify if you need me." Her support felt like a lifeline. I knew we needed legal help to make this stick. I called Rachel, a friend from college who'd become a lawyer specializing in elder rights. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. Over steaming lattes, I laid out everything: Grandpa's condition, the texts, the unpaid bills, Dr. Morgan's assessment. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she read the messages. "This is strong evidence of neglect," she said, jotting notes. "We can file a civil case for elder mistreatment. It won't be easy, but we have a shot." I exhaled, feeling a mix of hope and dread. "I'm in," I said. "Whatever it takes." But my family wasn't going to let this go quietly. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a call from my dad. "Drop this, Lorraine," he said, his voice cold. "You're out of the family if you keep pushing." I gripped the phone, my heart racing. "You don't get to scare me off," I replied, my voice steady. The next day, my mom left a voicemail, her tone pleading but sharp. "Think about what you're doing to us. You're ruining our lives." My sister texted, her words venomous. "You'll regret this, Lorraine." Each attempt to sway me only made me angrier. They thought they could intimidate me, but I was done backing down. I met with Rachel again, showing her the threatening messages. "This shows their desperation," she said, saving copies. "It'll help our case." Stephen and Helen kept digging, finding a neighbor who'd seen Grandpa left outside multiple times, not just on Christmas Eve. I spent evenings with Grandpa, helping him adjust to my apartment, setting up a new doctor's visit to get his meds back on track. He smiled more now, but his eyes still carried a quiet pain. "I never wanted to cause trouble," he said one night. I squeezed his hand. "You're worth fighting for, Grandpa." By mid-January, our case was taking shape. Rachel filed the initial paperwork, And Dr. Morgan submitted her report detailing Grandpa's emotional distress. Stephen's clinic records and Helen's screenshots were ready to go. My family's pressure only strengthened my resolve. They'd tried to break Grandpa, but they wouldn't break me. I was ready to face them in court to make them answer for every cruel word and neglected need. The Rochester courthouse felt cold and unwelcoming. The February air clung to my coat as I guided Grandpa inside his steps, slow but steady. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, but all I could focus on was the wooden bench where my family sat. My dad, mom, and sister, their faces set in defiance. Rachel squeezed my arm. "We've got this," she whispered, but my stomach churned with nerves. Months of preparation, Dr. Morgan's report. Stephen's clinic records, Helen's screenshots had led to this moment. I was ready to fight for Grandpa to make them pay for what they'd done. Rachel stood first, her voice clear as she presented our case. She showed the judge Dr. Morgan's assessment detailing Grandpa's emotional distress from years of neglect. Vernon Ramsey was left outside in freezing conditions. She said her words sharp. Medical records show missed appointments and unpaid bills totaling $2,000. She held up the USB drive displaying the text messages where my mom and sister mocked Grandpa's tremors, calling him a shaky liability. The courtroom grew quiet, the weight of those words hanging heavy. I glanced at Grandpa sitting beside me, his hands folded tightly. His eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of hope. Then my family's lawyer rose, a slick man in an expensive suit. "These are exaggerations," he said smoothly. "The Reeds provided adequate care." My dad took the stand, his posture confident, his voice steady. "We've done nothing wrong," he said, adjusting his tie. Vernon's condition made him difficult. We paid thousands for his care. I clenched my fists, my heart racing. Thousands. They'd let his prescriptions lapse, ignored his therapy. Rachel objected, but the judge waved her off, letting my dad continue. "Lorraine's blowing this out of proportion," he added, glancing at me with a smirk. The judge's face remained unreadable, but I felt a chill. My dad wasn't just a businessman. He had connections, local council members, wealthy clients who could sway opinions. When Rachel tried to submit the text messages, their lawyer argued they were out of context and possibly fabricated. To my shock, the judge agreed, ruling them inadmissible without further authentication. I leaned toward Rachel, whispering, "How is this possible?" She shook her head, her jaw tight. "Influence," she muttered. My family's smug looks confirmed it. They thought they'd won. Then came the worst blow. Karen Walsh, Grandpa's former caregiver, was called to testify. I'd never met her, but Helen had warned me she'd worked for my parents before quitting last year. Karen took the stand, her eyes avoiding mine. Vernon was well cared for, she said, her voice flat. The Reeds did their best. He was often confused, made things up. My breath caught. That was a lie. Grandpa's mind was sharp despite his Parkinson's. Rachel cross-examined, pressing Karen about her sudden departure, but Karen stayed vague, claiming she left for personal reasons. Later, Helen whispered to me, "She's been paid off. I saw her with your dad last week." My stomach sank. They'd bought her silence. Helen testified next, her voice steady, as she recounted seeing Grandpa shivering outside on Christmas Eve. "I saw him neglected multiple times," she said, her gaze fixed on the judge. But my family's lawyer twisted her words, painting her as a nosy neighbor with a grudge. The judge seemed to buy it, scribbling notes without looking up. Stephen took the stand, presenting clinic records of Grandpa's missed appointments, but the defense dismissed them as clerical errors. I watched my family's faces, my dad's calm nod, my mom's faint smile, my sister's bored yawn. They thought they were untouchable. When I took the stand, my voice shook, but grew stronger. My grandfather was left alone, mocked and ignored, I said, looking straight at my family. They called him a burden, left him in the cold. I have proof, but the judge cut me off, saying my testimony was emotional, not factual. My heart sank. Rachel fought hard, presenting every document, but the defense countered with my dad's influence and Karen's lies. The courtroom felt like it was closing in the truth, slipping away. The judge delivered the verdict in a flat tone. "Vernon Ramsey may live with Lorraine Reed," he said. "No evidence of intentional mistreatment is sufficient." My family exhaled their relief palpable. I sat frozen disbelief washing over me. No consequences. After everything, Rachel touched my arm. "We got him out," she said softly. "That's something." But it wasn't enough. They'd walked free, their cruelty unpunished. As we left the courtroom, Grandpa squeezed my hand. "You tried, Lorraine?" He said, his voice quiet but proud. I nodded, fighting tears, knowing the real fight was just beginning. Weeks after the trial, Rochester was buzzing with outrage. A local newspaper had picked up the story, running a headline about my family's neglect of Grandpa. The article didn't name them outright, but everyone in our tight-knit community knew who it meant. Social media amplified the anger. Posts on X called my dad a heartless businessman and my sister a selfish socialite. I scrolled through the comments at my apartment, my heart heavy but unsurprised. The truth was out, and it was cutting deeper than any courtroom verdict. My dad's business took the hardest hit. A major client, a Rochester real estate firm, canceled a 7-figure contract citing ethical concerns. He called me one evening, his voice shaking with rage. "You've shamed us all, Lorraine," he spat. "This is your fault." I hung up my hands, trembling. He'd brought this on himself, but his words still stung. My mom faced her own fallout. She was let go from her hospital admin job after colleagues whispered about her role in Grandpa's mistreatment. "It's unfair," she texted me, but I didn't reply. My sister, always obsessed with her social circle, found herself shunned. Invitations to galas dried up, and her so-called friends stopped calling. I heard she spent most days alone, scrolling through the same X posts that condemned her. I didn't revel in their downfall. The pain of cutting ties with my family lingered, but I knew it was necessary. My focus was Grandpa, who was slowly finding his place in my apartment. Stephen connected us with a local senior support group meeting weekly at a community center. I took Grandpa there one chilly March morning, his navy cap perched proudly on his head. The group welcomed him warmly, retirees sharing stories, playing cards, and laughing over coffee. Grandpa's eyes lit up as he swapped tales of his Navy days with a veteran named Carl. For the first time in months, I saw him smile without hesitation. Helen Walsh joined us at the next meeting, her presence a quiet strength. She'd become more than a neighbor, a friend who'd stood by us through the worst. "Vernon's got a spark again," she said, watching him chat with the group. I nodded, gratitude swelling in my chest. Stephen, ever the steady ally, checked in regularly, ensuring Grandpa's new doctor kept his Parkinson's meds consistent. The group gave Grandpa a routine, a community, and I saw him regain a piece of himself, his humor, his stories, his pride. One evening, he showed Carl's grandson how to tie a fishing knot, his trembling hands steady with purpose. I watched from across the room, my throat tight with relief. As the weeks passed, I reflected on what had happened. The trial hadn't delivered the justice I'd hoped for. No fines, no formal punishment for my family. But the community's response was a different kind of reckoning. Neighbors who once nodded politely at my parents now crossed the street to avoid them. A local blog posted about elder neglect, citing our case without names, urging people to check on their loved ones. It sparked conversations at the community center, with members sharing their own fears of being forgotten. I realized then that justice wasn't just about courtrooms, it was about people standing up, speaking out, refusing to let cruelty slide. One night, as Grandpa and I sat on my couch, he turned to me. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, his voice soft but clear. "But you did." I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words. "Your family, Grandpa," I replied. "That's enough." He nodded, his eyes glistening. In that moment, I understood what mattered most. It wasn't about punishing my family, though they'd faced their consequences. It was about giving Grandpa a life where he felt valued, seen, loved. The community center became our anchor. Stephen and Helen joined us for a potluck there where Grandpa shared his famous chili recipe laughing as Carl teased him about secret ingredients. I watched them, my heart full. This was the real victory, not a judge's gavel, but the warmth of people who cared. I'd fought for Grandpa, but it was the community, Helen's courage, Stephen's loyalty, the group's kindness that made the difference. Justice, I learned, came from standing together, from choosing family not by blood but by heart.